Thank you, Dr. Bush. Okay, we'll jump right in for the sake of time. So to set up the purpose of our presentation, we know it's important that as agricultural educators and extension officers working in developing countries, it's important that we understand how new agricultural technologies and practices will impact the communities in which we work or partner with. And that means understanding how they might impact both men and women. Yet, unfortunately, oftentimes the role of women in agricultural value chains is either considered invisible or it's poorly understood by practitioners in international ag and extension education. And so today, Margaret and I are really excited to spend a few minutes sharing an example of a model that we have recently used in Afghanistan to look at value chain mapping through a gender lens. And then also highlight a few kind of lessons learned through our work and how we worked with a local institution to build local capacity as well. So quick introductions. My name's Carmen Benson. I am a gender and youth program advisor at Michigan State University, but I am also a student in the doctoral program at Texas A&M University's ALEC department. And I am joined by Margaret Orwig. She's a senior technical advisor to RSI Consulting in Afghanistan. They're one of the leading local monitoring and evaluation firms. Margaret's joining us from Istanbul, Turkey today, but she brings 10 or perhaps more years of experience working in Afghanistan. So I'm really excited to co-present with her today. Looking quickly at the big picture, we know globally women play significant roles in agricultural production and other areas of the value chain. So in developing countries, women often make up as much as 43% or higher of the agricultural labor force. And in some developing countries and regions, women produce 60% or more of the food that's consumed at the household level. Oftentimes, women are solely or almost solely responsible for agricultural activities such as kitchen gardening and raising of livestock for the family. Yet producers, but especially women in developing countries, face a whole host of challenges. We don't have time today to talk about these in too many details, but they range from land ownership and tenure policies that are quite limiting for women in many countries, all the way to what Dr. Valerie Hudson from Texas A&M University calls the first political order factors. So issues with violence against women and girls, kind of the compounding effects of patrilineal societies and what that does as far as women's access to information and to education. And so the point in the middle that we highlighted was women's access to inputs and technologies, but specifically women's access to agricultural extension services. In 2011, FAO found that, I think they looked in 94 developing countries, and 10% or less of the investment in agricultural extension actually reached programs that impacted women. So that was a decade ago. I hope it's improved since then, but we know still women are vastly underrepresented as far as receivers of quality extension services. And so when working on the USAID funded Grain Research and Innovation Project in Afghanistan, which is a research capacity building project, but of course we're working to connect research to extension as well. We saw that it was really important to understand gender roles in the value chain. And we were able to use the integrating gender issues into ag value chains model. And I, in a minute or two, will share a link in the chat box so you can have a full resource and guide on how you might use the model. But the model is based on three conclusions. The first is that value chains and therefore our interventions are embedded in a social context, as we know. Value chain development, and so our activities in developing countries affect gender roles in the community. And so if our activities are gender blind, we run the risk of even widening the gap between men and women, where we're aiming for gender transformative programs that actually empower women in agriculture. And then finally, gender equality and value chain competitiveness are mutually supportive goals. And so this isn't a research presentation, so we won't go in depth into methodology, but we did use a variety of methods and tools, including focus group discussions, key informant interviews, and then we drew a lot from rapid role appraisal techniques and participatory role appraisal techniques such as visual mapping. But with that, I'll hand it over to Margaret to share details about and lessons learned from the work in Afghanistan.
Can you guys hear me? So as Carmen mentioned, unfortunately, we can't get into the details on the methods. We can maybe do another presentation on that one day. But using those methods, we went through, it was a two-stage process that aimed to first map gender roles along the full wheat value chain in central Afghanistan, including identifying all the actors, links between them, their participation in activities, and also where the actors exert influence and control in decision-making processes. We also identified constraints and opportunities for women to participate. And then we identified barriers, especially to technology adoption and improved practices, and how these barriers differed or were compounded by gender-specific factors. The first stage was a workshop with national and provincial stakeholders, and that workshop was held to identify at what points of the value chain women were working. And the second stage was to talk with women at the different nodes that had been identified in the first stage. And the interviews with the women ended up focusing primarily at the production and processing points, as that's sort of where we found from the stakeholder workshop that women had the most participation. And the slide, the results really highlighted the importance of gender-focused exercises. We hear it's important to do that, but it was really illuminating what we found. What was really interesting to me is that we found that women play profoundly integral roles in determining wheat quality, especially through activities of seed selection and storage. When we started, policymakers, practitioners, national level, provincial level, throughout the country told us, women are not involved in wheat production. There's no point in doing any kind of gender exercise or research. Or they said, they're only sort of minimally involved in external household support roles. But when we talked to both men and women in the farming communities, we didn't find that to be the case at all. In fact, we found that several key areas where women were not only involved, but had overt authority over the process. But we also found that women were largely untrained and mostly overlooked by training and development programs, to the detriment of wheat quality in Afghanistan. Slide. So some of the considerations that we went through doing this kind of research, there's important geographic, security, cultural dynamics to keep in mind. Community access in terms of security is important, but also knowing the community where you're doing research, ensuring researchers speak the same language, women researchers interview women, men researchers interview men, sort of the research 101 of knowing the community where you are. Another point is that the season is very important when talking to farming families, to make sure you're not trying to conduct interviews during harvest season, for example. But when talking to women in Afghanistan, even the time of day can be really important. For example, when you do interviews with women, they have a window of time from when they prepare their bread in the morning and let it rise to when they need to bake it. And you've seen research where towards the end of focus groups, if they get too long, you see women starting to get mad and saying that their bread's gonna fall and that they're not gonna be able to bake it and they're leaving the interviews. We didn't run into that in this research, but it certainly happens a lot. So, understanding that is very important. Understanding the landholding dynamics in the communities are really important. For this study, we wanted to find people who had land to farm so we could understand the very specifics of what they were doing. A limitation of this is that we didn't talk to landless households and how they might be contributing to the wheat value chain. The study was also focused on central Afghanistan in one area, understanding the different gender dynamics across regions and socioeconomic categories are definitely important areas for future research, but they were not explored in ours. We find in general, for example, poorer households are more likely to have women participating in field activities. Richer households tend to hire male labor for farming activities, for more intensive labor, more labor intensive activities like threshing. Carmen?
again, so that was a quick overview. We are working as a team to publish, well, we have published the results at one international conference, and we're working on a full publication as well that we've been invited to present. But the other area we wanted to share is that when Margaret and I say we're actually speaking for a pretty large team that we partnered with in Afghanistan. So rather than just hiring a consultant firm or having this be a very kind of international consultant-based approach, we developed a partnership with Kabul University in Afghanistan. And so the co-investigators on this project are actually professors from Kabul University's Faculty of Agriculture. And the really fun part is we were able to engage Afghan students in agriculture as research assistants. So the program was able to provide training and one-on-one support all the way from the research design through data analysis. And now we're working as a team on both publishing the results for a scholarly community, but getting the results out to policymakers in Afghanistan. And so we think it's really important, that local capacity building piece. And I think the COVID-19 situation has underscored the importance of local capacity building for research, because even though international travel is halted, if we have these meaningful partnerships and there's capacity in the countries that we're partnering with, then to the extent the local context allows, the activities can continue to some extent. So it's really underscored the importance of that. So with that, I think we're at or probably over our time, but Margaret and I had 3 take-home messages we wanted to share, other than we will share links in the chat box. The first is that this effort was kind of at the needs assessment stage, but looking at our activities through a gender lens doesn't end there. From program design to implementation to evaluation, we should look at how our programs are impacting men and women in the community. Second is, again, underscoring the importance of that local capacity building and seeing how we might elevate our partnerships with our developing country partners so that they are, we are working together as co-PIs and eventually working ourselves out of a job, so that the local institutions can continue the work. And then finally, real practical implications of this. The results give us that evidence base that we need to go back to Afghan policymakers and decision makers and really advocate for programs that are responsive to the needs of men and women. So we have actually been able to use these results right away in meetings with deputy ministers and so on. So with that, thank you for your attention. Dr. Bush, if we have time for questions, we'd be happy to answer those.
You have 2 minutes if you want to take a question, and then by all means, we hopefully will have some time at the end to have some good discussion too, but you do have 2 minutes left.
Okay. Ask away.
I actually don't have a question. I just kind of have a comment. I've had 12 years of military experience, still in civil affairs, et cetera, and I just got back from Afghanistan. My second combat deployment there was Special Forces, and so I don't normally get to see the good stuff. And I really appreciate what Margaret and Carmen, what you guys shared today, because it's kind of cool to see, hey, maybe some of the things that are going on over there are really changing and good things are happening. So thank you.
Yeah. That's wonderful.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And we can share more details about this particular program, but some of the other achievements in Afghanistan as well, because they are encouraging.
So Carmen and Margaret, I want to make a comment. I enjoyed your presentation and I want to kind of give a comment. So we recruited Carmen to work with us on a project that Dr. Manuel Pena is leading up called Gender Lensed Curricula for International Development. So it's meant to help students coming out of our universities be more prepared to do what y'all are doing. When we recruited you, Carmen, I hadn't heard this presentation or anything. And so now I'm like going, I'm so glad you're working with us, because this is like, so these are relevant, real, not just from a textbook. This is real. And it shows how important it is that our students and the people we work with understand this whole idea of seeing the role that gender plays and how women and men maybe it may look like one way and it is something different in terms of understanding that. So
Mhm.
just a comment, if you're interested in this topic that Margaret and Carmen have shared, please email me and I'll be happy to kind of make you aware of anything else that's coming out of that project. For example, they're having a seminar next week. So if you're interested, holler at me and I'll be happy to get you connected with that topic. But Carmen and Margaret, I loved hearing y'all's presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're glad other people are excited about it too.